The Volanthi Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships moved through the darkness of space like silent predators, claiming world after world. No species had ever truly challenged them. No civilization had ever made them afraid. They were the masters of 900 star systems, and their word was law across the entire Orion arm of the galaxy. When their patrol fleet found the small blue planet called Earth, they saw nothing special. The world had no orbital stations. It had no energy shields. It showed no signs of faster-than-light technology. The Volanthi commanders looked at the billions of creatures living on its surface and saw only resources waiting to be claimed. They sent 3 warships to begin the standard process of territorial acquisition. The attack came without warning on a bright morning in March, and the massive alien vessels descended through the clouds over Australia and began firing on the cities below. Brisbane burned first, then Sydney, then Melbourne. The Volanthi expected the primitive inhabitants to scatter and hide. They expected fear and chaos and eventual surrender. What they got instead was something they had never experienced before. Within 40 minutes of the first shot, human military forces responded with everything they had. Fighter jets swarmed the alien ships like angry insects. Missiles streaked up from hidden bases. The nations of Earth had been fighting each other for thousands of years, and they had become very good at it. Now, for the first time, they had a common target. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, all 3 Volanthi warships were destroyed. One had been brought down by a nuclear strike, and another had crashed into the ocean after human fighters found a weakness in its shields. The third had been captured mostly intact when its crew was killed by a coordinated assault. 11 million humans died that day, but 15,000 Volanthi soldiers died with them, and the Empire had lost 3 of its warships to a species that supposedly could not even travel between planets. 6 months passed. The humans worked day and night on the captured ship. They pulled apart its engines and studied its weapons. They decoded its communication systems and learned to send messages across the stars. And when they did, the Volanthi Empire finally realized that something had gone very wrong. The High Council of Volanthos Prime sent a formal summons, and they demanded that a human representative appear before them to explain what they called unprovoked aggression against Imperial vessels. The message was arrogant and threatening. It spoke of consequences and punishment and the full might of the Empire. The leaders of Earth read the message and chose their response carefully. They would send someone to speak for humanity, but they would not send a soldier or a general. They would send a man who had spent his entire life talking to people who wanted to kill each other. Daniel Price was 53 years old. He had gray hair at his temples and calm brown eyes that never seemed to show fear. For 20 years, he had worked as a negotiator, traveling to the most dangerous places on Earth to help enemies find peace. He had sat across the table from warlords and dictators and terrorists. He had learned that the most powerful weapon in any conflict was not a gun or a bomb. It was words. When the government asked him to represent humanity before an alien empire, he said yes without hesitation. His aide for the mission was a young naval officer named Katie Morrison. She was 29 years old with short dark hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had been stationed at Pearl Harbor when the Volanthi attacked. She had watched her brother die when an alien energy beam destroyed his ship. She carried that grief with her like a weight, but she never let it slow her down. They traveled to Volanthos Prime aboard a salvaged Volanthi shuttle. The journey took 3 days through something the aliens called fold space. Daniel spent most of that time reading everything humanity had learned about the Empire. Katie spent it checking and rechecking the equipment they were bringing. The capital world of the Volanthi was a planet twice the size of Earth, covered in massive cities that glowed with cold blue light. Ships moved through its skies in endless streams. The scale of it all was almost impossible to comprehend. Their shuttle landed at a port near the central government complex. Armed guards escorted them through corridors made of some dark stone that seemed to absorb light. The Volanthi themselves were tall creatures with scaled skin and 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across their faces. They moved with a fluid grace that made them look almost like they were swimming through the air. The council chamber was enormous. 12 Volanthi elders sat on a raised platform, looking down at the 2 humans who stood alone in the center of the room, and their robes shimmered with embedded crystals that pulsed with soft light. Behind them, massive screens displayed symbols and text in the alien language. High Counselor Xyrith was the oldest and most powerful of them all. His scales had faded to a pale gray, and his eyes glowed with a deep orange light. He studied the humans for a long moment before speaking. His voice was translated by a device that made his words sound flat and mechanical. You have been summoned to explain your species' unprovoked aggression against Imperial vessels. 3 of our ships were destroyed. 15,000 of our people were killed. This is an act of war against the Volanthi Empire. The other counselors murmured in agreement. Some of them looked at the humans with open hatred. Others seemed merely curious, studying these strange creatures who had somehow defeated their warships. Daniel Price stood perfectly still. He did not bow or show any sign of submission. He simply waited, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. The counselors shifted in their seats. They were not used to being made to wait. Finally, Daniel spoke. His voice was quiet but clear, carrying easily through the vast chamber. I think there has been a misunderstanding about who attacked whom. The counselors fell silent. High Counselor Xyrith leaned forward, his 6 eyes narrowing. Explain yourself, human. Daniel reached into the briefcase he carried and pulled out a small device. Katie helped him place it on the floor in front of them. With the council's permission, Daniel said, I would like to present some evidence. I believe it will help clarify exactly what happened on my world 6 months ago. Xyrith waved one clawed hand. Proceed. Daniel activated the device, and the air above it filled with light. Images began to form, and the true story of what had happened on Earth began to unfold before the eyes of the Volanthi High Council. The holographic projector hummed softly as images filled the air above it. The light cast strange shadows across the faces of the Volanthi counselors as they watched. What they saw made several of them lean back in their seats. The first images showed Earth from space. The blue oceans and green continents looked peaceful and calm. Then the view shifted to show 3 Volanthi warships entering the atmosphere. They descended through the clouds like dark arrows, their hulls glowing with energy shields. This footage was captured by our satellites on March 15th, Daniel Price said. His voice remained calm and steady. Your ships entered our atmosphere at exactly 6:47 in the morning local time. They made no attempt to communicate. They sent no signals. They simply appeared and began their attack. The hologram changed to show the streets of Brisbane. People were walking to work. Children were playing in parks. Cars moved along the roads. It was an ordinary morning in an ordinary city. Then the sky turned to fire. Energy beams lanced down from above, cutting through buildings like they were made of paper. Explosions bloomed across the city center. People ran screaming through streets filled with smoke and falling debris. The camera shook as shockwaves rolled through the area. 37 million people lived in the areas your ships targeted, Daniel continued. They were civilians, families, children. They had done nothing to threaten your empire. They did not even know your empire existed. Counselor Preth made a dismissive sound. Your people were simply in the way. The patrol fleet was conducting a standard resource assessment. This is normal procedure for claiming undeveloped worlds. Katie Morrison stepped forward. Her jaw was tight with barely controlled anger, but her voice stayed level. Undeveloped? We had cities with millions of people. We had hospitals and schools and universities. We had art and music and literature that stretched back thousands of years. She pointed at the hologram, which now showed bodies lying in the rubble. Or does this look like an undeveloped world to you? The counselors shifted uncomfortably. Counselor Veleth, the eldest among them, raised one hand to quiet the murmuring. "Continue your presentation," he said. "Show us what happened next." Daniel nodded and changed the image. The hologram now showed military bases around the world springing to life. Radar systems tracked the alien ships. Communications flew between nations that had been rivals for decades. Within 40 minutes of the first attack, our military forces responded. We did not know what we were fighting. We did not know if we could win, but we knew we had to try. The footage showed fighter jets launching from airfields, missiles rising from hidden silos, ships at sea turning toward the battle zone. It was a coordinated response on a scale the Volanthi had never seen from a primitive species. "Your commanders made a mistake," Daniel said. "They assumed that because we could not travel between stars, we were weak. They did not understand that humanity has spent its entire history fighting. We have been at war with ourselves for 10,000 years. We have perfected weapons and strategies that your people never needed to develop." The hologram showed the first Volanthi warship being swarmed by fighter jets. The pilots were dying by the dozens, but they kept coming. They found weak points in the shields and exploited them. They crashed their planes into engine ports when their weapons ran dry. 600 pilots died taking down that first ship, Daniel said quietly. They knew they were going to die, and they did it anyway. The second ship was brought down by a nuclear strike. The hologram showed the missile rising through the sky, punching through the weakened shields, and detonating against the hull. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. We had never used nuclear weapons against another species before, Daniel said. We had only used them against ourselves, twice in our history. But when you attacked our home, we did not hesitate. The third ship had crashed into the ocean after human forces disabled its engines. Divers and salvage teams had worked for days to recover it. The hologram showed the massive vessel being towed to shore, its hull scorched and broken, but still mostly intact. "This ship is how we learned to talk to you," Daniel explained. "Our engineers took it apart piece by piece. They studied your technology. They learned your language from the databanks, and they discovered how to send messages across the stars." High Counselor Zyreth had been silent throughout the presentation. Now he spoke, his voice carrying a hint of something that might have been concern. "You expect us to believe that a species without spaceflight capability destroyed 3 Imperial warships?" "I do not expect anything," Daniel replied. "I am simply showing you what happened. Your own ship's logs will confirm everything I have said. Your commanders recorded their attack. They recorded their surprise when we fought back, and they recorded their final moments when they realized they were going to lose." He pulled up one final piece of footage. It showed the bridge of one of the Volanthi ships in its last minutes. The crew was panicking, alarms were blaring, and through the viewport, human missiles were streaking toward them. The Volanthi commander could be heard shouting orders that no one followed. Then there was a flash of light, and the recording ended. The council chamber was silent. The holographic projector faded, leaving only the 2 humans standing in the center of the room. 11 million of our people died that day, Daniel said. His voice was no longer calm. There was an edge to it now, a cold hardness that made some of the counselors shift in their seats. 11 million innocent lives, ended without warning or reason. And you summoned us here to explain our aggression? He took a step toward the raised platform where the counselors sat. The guards moved to stop him, but Zyreth waved them back. "You attacked our home," Daniel said, and each word fell like a stone into still water. "You came to our world and murdered our people. You expected us to surrender or die, but we did neither." He pointed at the ceiling, at the stars beyond. "And now you will have to deal with the consequences." Counselor Merveth laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Consequences! You are one small world with no fleet, no allies, no resources. What consequences could you possibly bring against the Volanthi Empire?" Katie Morrison smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Would you like us to show you?" The council chamber erupted into chaos. Counselors shouted over each other in their native language. Their translator devices struggled to keep up with the overlapping voices. Some of them were demanding that the humans be arrested. Others were calling for an immediate military response. A few sat in stunned silence, staring at the two small figures who had just challenged the most powerful empire in the galaxy. High Counselor Zireth raised all four of his arms and bellowed a command that silenced the room. The echoes of his voice faded slowly against the dark stone walls. When he spoke again, his tone was controlled but dangerous. You would threaten the Volanthi Empire? You who cannot even leave your own world without stealing our technology? Daniel Price did not flinch. I am not threatening anyone. I am simply stating facts. You asked about consequences. My aide offered to explain them. If you would prefer to remain ignorant, that is your choice. Zireth studied the human for a long moment. The creature was small and fragile, with none of the natural weapons that evolution had given the Volanthi, and its skin was soft. Its eyes could only see in a narrow range of light. It should have been trembling with fear. Instead, it stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and spoke as if they were equals. Very well, Zireth said finally. Explain these consequences. Katie Morrison stepped forward and pulled a small tablet from her bag. She had been preparing for this moment since the day she learned about the mission. Every night on the journey to Volanthos Prime, she had reviewed the data, making sure she understood every detail. In the 6 months since your attack, humanity has made some significant progress, she began. Your commanders thought they were attacking a primitive civilization. They were wrong. We may not have had spaceflight technology, but we had everything else. Advanced computing, nuclear physics, the materials science, genetic engineering. We simply had not yet figured out how to break the light speed barrier. She activated her tablet, and new holographic images appeared in the air. They showed human scientists working in massive laboratories, surrounded by pieces of Volanthi equipment. Your ship gave us the missing pieces. Within 2 weeks, our physicists understood the basic principles of your fold space drive. Within a month, we had built our first prototype. It exploded. Katie paused and allowed herself a small smile. The second one worked. Counselor Preth made a scoffing sound. You expect us to believe you have built a faster-than-light engine in 6 months. That technology took the Volanthi centuries to develop. Your species developed it from nothing, Katie replied. We had a working example to study. There is a difference. She changed the image to show the captured warship sitting in an enormous hangar. Human engineers swarmed over it like ants on a fallen tree. Cranes lifted sections of hull plating. Cables snaked into open-access ports. It was being taken apart, piece by piece, and every piece was being studied, documented, and copied. We have also reverse-engineered your weapon systems, Katie continued. Your energy projection technology is actually quite simple once you understand the underlying physics. We have already begun manufacturing our own versions. They are not as elegant as yours, but they work. She pulled up another image. This one showed a human battleship, still under construction in a dry dock somewhere on Earth. It was ugly compared to the sleek Volanthi designs. It was all sharp angles and heavy armor plating, but the weapon mounts along its hull were clearly based on alien technology. The first of our new warships will be completed within 3 months, Katie said. We call it the Defiance. It is not as advanced as your vessels. It is slower and less maneuverable, but it carries enough firepower to destroy a small fleet, and it is only the first of many. The counselors were no longer shouting. They were staring at the holographic images with expressions that mixed disbelief with growing concern. Counselor Veleth leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying the human ship. Even if what you say is true, he said slowly, one ship cannot threaten an empire of 900 star systems. You would need thousands of vessels to challenge our fleets. Daniel Price spoke up. You are absolutely right. One ship cannot threaten your empire, but one ship can threaten one system. One ship can appear at one of your colony worlds and demand that they listen. One ship can prove that your empire is not invincible. He walked slowly across the chamber floor, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Before your attack, humanity was divided. We had hundreds of nations that could not agree on anything. We fought wars over land, over resources, over ideas. We wasted our potential on conflicts with each other. He stopped and turned to face the council directly. Your attack changed everything. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth is working together. Every factory, every laboratory, every military force, all of them focused on a single goal. He paused to let his words sink in. You did not just wake up one small world. You unified a species that has spent 10,000 years learning how to fight. And now all of that knowledge, all of that experience, all of that anger is pointed directly at you. High Counselor Xyreth sat back in his seat. His 6 eyes blinked slowly as he processed what the human was saying. He had ruled the council for 200 years. He had overseen the absorption of dozens of species into the empire. He had never heard a primitive speak to him this way. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Why did you come here? Surely not just to threaten us." Daniel shook his head. "I did not come here to threaten anyone. I came here to deliver a message." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small data chip. It was a tiny thing, barely the size of a fingernail, but it contained information that would change everything. "This chip contains a complete history of human warfare," Daniel said. "Every conflict we have ever fought, every weapon we have ever created, every strategy we have ever used. We are giving it to you freely so that you can understand exactly what you are dealing with." Counselor Merveth laughed nervously. "Why would you give us such information? Are you trying to help us defeat you?" Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No. We are helping you understand why you should never try." High Counselor Xyreth dismissed the other council members and requested a private audience with the human delegation. The chamber emptied slowly, with many counselors casting suspicious glances at Daniel and Katie as they left. When the doors finally closed, only 3 beings remained in the vast room. Xyreth descended from his raised platform and approached the humans. Up close, he was even more impressive. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled body moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. His 6 eyes studied Daniel with an intensity that would have made most beings look away. Daniel did not look away. "Come," Xyreth said. "Let us speak somewhere more comfortable." He led them through a side door into a smaller chamber. The walls were covered with ancient tapestries that depicted scenes from Volanthe history. Great battles, conquered worlds, the rise of the empire from a single planet to the dominant power in the galaxy. It was a room designed to remind visitors of Volanthe supremacy. Daniel studied the tapestries for a moment, but then took a seat across from the High Counselor. Katie remained standing, her eyes never leaving the alien leader. "You must understand our position," Xyreth began. His voice was different now, softer and more thoughtful. "The Empire has existed for 12,000 years. We have brought order to hundreds of species. We have prevented countless wars. We have created stability across the stars." "Stability for whom?" Daniel asked. Xyreth paused. "For everyone. The species that join us willingly are given full membership in the Empire. They share in our technology, our resources, our protection. And those who do not join willingly?" The High Counselor was silent for a long moment. His eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among his kind. "Some species resist," he admitted finally. "When that happens, we do what is necessary. It is regrettable, but it is how galactic civilization has always functioned. The strong absorb the weak. It is the natural order." Katie stepped forward. "There is nothing natural about what you did to our world. You attacked civilians. You murdered children. You did not even give us a chance to surrender. Your world showed no signs of spaceflight capability, Zyreth replied. Standard protocol for such worlds is immediate territorial claim. The patrol commanders were following established procedures. Procedures that treat entire civilizations as nothing more than obstacles to be removed, Daniel said. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. You saw our cities, you saw our people, and you decided that none of it mattered. Zyreth made a gesture that might have been a shrug. In the long term, absorption into the Empire would have benefited your species. You would have gained access to technologies far beyond your current capabilities. You would have been protected from threats you do not even know exist. Protected? Katie laughed bitterly. Is that what you call killing 11 million people? Protection? The High Counselor's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of discomfort. The patrol commanders exceeded their authority. They were supposed to secure the planet, not destroy it. What happened to your cities was not supposed to occur. Daniel leaned forward. But it did occur, and now we need to talk about what happens next. He placed the data chip on the table between them. It sat there like a tiny bomb, waiting to explode. This chip contains everything you need to know about humanity, Daniel said. Our history, our wars, our weapons. I want you to study it carefully, because it will help you understand exactly what kind of enemy you have made. Zyreth picked up the chip with one clawed hand. I have already reviewed your species' basic information. You are aggressive, certainly, tribal, prone to conflict, but these traits are common among primitive civilizations. They usually fade as species mature. Our traits have not faded, Daniel replied. They have grown stronger. We have been fighting each other for so long that warfare is part of our very nature. We have developed weapons that can destroy entire cities in seconds. We have created poisons that can wipe out populations. We have built machines that can think and fight without human guidance. He stood and walked to one of the tapestries on the wall. It showed a Volanthi fleet bombarding a planet into submission. Your empire has conquered through superior technology and overwhelming force. You have never faced an enemy who could match you. But humanity learns fast. We adapt. We overcome. He turned to face Zyreth directly. In 6 months, we went from knowing nothing about faster-than-light travel to building our own ships. How long do you think it will take us to catch up completely? Zyreth's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that you have a choice to make, Daniel said. You can send your fleets to Earth and try to finish what you started. You will probably win. Your technology is still far superior to ours, but it will cost you. We will fight for every inch of our world. We will make you pay in blood for every city you destroy. And when it is over, you will have gained a dead planet and lost thousands of ships. He walked back to the table and sat down again. Or you can choose a different path. You can recognize that humanity is not like the other species you have encountered. You can accept that we will never surrender, never submit, never stop fighting. And you can decide that it is better to have us as allies than as enemies. Katie placed her tablet on the table and activated it. A star map appeared, showing the location of Earth relative to Volanthi space. We are not asking to join your empire, she said. We are not asking for technology or resources or protection. We are simply asking to be left alone. They give us our corner of the galaxy and we will stay out of yours. High Counselor Zyreth stared at the star map for a long time. His species had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They had never negotiated with a species they could simply conquer. But this species was different. They had proven that in fire and blood. And if we refuse? He asked quietly. Daniel Price smiled. It was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. Then we will show you exactly why you should have accepted. The human delegation left Volanthos Prime 3 days after their meeting with High Counselor Zyreth. No formal agreement was reached, no treaties were signed. But something had changed in the way the Volanthi looked at the small blue world on the edge of their territory. The journey home took another 3 days through fold space. Daniel Price spent most of it staring out the viewport at the strange colors that swirled around them. He had done everything he could. Now it was up to the council to decide what came next. Katie Morrison sat beside him, reading through reports from Earth. The work had not stopped while they were away. New factories were being built, new weapons were being tested, volunteers were lining up to join the newly formed Space Defense Force. Humanity was preparing for war, even as it hoped for peace. "Do you think they believed us?" Katie asked without looking up from her tablet. Daniel considered the question. "I think Zyreth is smarter than the other counselors. He understood what we were really saying." "And what were we really saying?" "That we are more trouble than we are worth." Daniel finally turned away from the viewport. "The Volanthi have ruled through fear and overwhelming force for 12,000 years. They have never had to think about the cost of conquest. We just gave them a reason to start." They arrived at Earth on a Tuesday morning. The salvaged shuttle descended through the clouds and landed at a military base in Nevada. A crowd of officials and military officers was waiting for them, along with dozens of reporters who had been kept behind security barriers. Daniel gave a brief statement to the cameras, then disappeared into a series of classified briefings that lasted for the next 2 weeks. He told the world leaders everything that had happened on Volanthos Prime. He described the council chamber and the arrogant counselors. He talked about his private meeting with Zyreth and the warning he had delivered. The world listened, and then the world got back to work. 18 months passed. In that time, humanity accomplished things that would have seemed impossible before the invasion. The United Nations was reorganized into a true global government, with every nation contributing resources and personnel to the common defense. Old enemies set aside their differences. Old borders became less important than the new frontier that waited among the stars. The first human-built faster-than-light vessel was completed on schedule. They called it the Unity because it represented everything humanity had become. It was not as elegant as the Volanthi ships. Its hull was thick and angular, covered in layers of armor plating that made it look more like a fortress than a vessel. But its engines worked perfectly, and its weapons were the most powerful ever created by human hands. Commander Katie Morrison stood on the bridge as the ship prepared for its maiden voyage. She had been promoted twice since returning from Volanthos Prime, and now she wore the uniform of the newly formed Earth Defense Fleet. Behind her, a crew of 200 men and women worked at their stations, checking and rechecking every system. Admiral Greg Patterson entered the bridge and took his place in the command chair. He was a veteran of 3 wars, a man who had spent his entire life preparing for battles that seemed small compared to what lay ahead. "Commander Morrison," he said formally. "Status report." Katie checked her console. "All systems are operational, Admiral. Fold space drive is charged and ready. We are cleared for departure." Patterson nodded. "Very well. Take us out." The Unity rose from its dock and climbed toward the stars. Below them, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it was just a blue marble against the blackness of space. 8 billion people looked up and watched their first starship begin its journey. As they prepared to engage the fold space drive, a communication came through on the new quantum relay system. Patterson read it and allowed himself a small smile. "The Volanthi High Council has requested another meeting," he said. "They want to discuss terms." Katie looked up from her station. "Terms for what? Surrender?" "Coexistence." Patterson shook his head slowly. "Apparently they spent the last 18 months studying that data chip Daniel gave them. They have decided that fighting us would be too expensive." Katie thought about her brother, or she thought about the millions who had died on that first terrible day. She thought about all the sleepless nights she had spent preparing for a war that might never come. "Is that enough?" she asked quietly. "After everything they did?" Patterson was silent for a long moment. Ambassador Price always said that the goal was not revenge. The goal was making sure nobody ever attacks Earth again. If we can achieve that through diplomacy, then perhaps it is enough. The Unity's engines hummed as the fold space drive activated. Space twisted around them, and suddenly they were somewhere else entirely. A binary star system filled the viewport, its twin suns casting golden light across a dozen orbiting planets. "This is the first system on our exploration list," Patterson announced to the crew. "Scans indicate no signs of intelligent life. But plenty of resources. If all goes well, this could be the first human colony outside our home system." Katie watched the unfamiliar stars through the viewport. A year ago, she had been a junior officer with no future. Now she was helping to lead humanity into a new era. The war with the Volanthi had not happened. The Council had looked at the evidence and decided that peace was more valuable than pride. It was not justice exactly. The dead were still dead. The wounds were still fresh. But it was a beginning. Back on Earth, Daniel Price watched the news coverage of the Unity's launch from his apartment in Chicago. He was not interested in space travel himself. His work was done. He had delivered humanity's message to the galaxy, and the galaxy had listened. His tablet beeped with an incoming message. It was from Xyrith, sent through the diplomatic channels they had established. "Your species continues to surprise us," the message read. "We look forward to learning more." Daniel smiled and typed his response. "You have no idea what you have started." He sent the message and turned off his tablet. Outside his window, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere above him, the Unity was carrying human beings to another star for the first time in history. The Volanthi had come to Earth expecting to find primitives. Instead, they had found something the galaxy had never seen before. A species forged in conflict, tempered by endless war, and now united by a common purpose. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same again.